All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. I know we've got a room full of executives, leaders, and decision makers. You all spend your days navigating incredibly complex systems, right? Supply chains, market dynamics, organizational frameworks, the whole shebang. But today, we're zooming in on a system that operates entirely inside the human mind. And yeah, it has massive bottom-line implications for both your human capital and consumer behavior. We're going to look at what our source material calls the digital mirror, focusing specifically on Instagram's engineered environment and the psychology of comparison. Look, this isn't just about some app on a phone. It's about understanding a pervasive force that is literally shaping the cognitive baseline of the people you rely on every single day.
So, what actually happens when a digital mirror is designed to trigger the psychology of comparison? Keep that question right at the forefront of your mind as we go through this. For years, the corporate world has just looked at platforms like Instagram as marketing real estate, right? Like digital billboards where we fight for attention. But we really need to move past that surface-level view. These platforms are not neutral software. They are highly potent behavioral modification engines. When a platform acts as a digital mirror, it isn't just passively reflecting reality. No way. It's an environment specifically engineered to activate deep-seated human vulnerabilities. Understanding how this engine operates, that's not just a marketing prerogative anymore. It's an absolute organizational imperative for you all.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the digital mirror and understanding the ecosystem.
So the source material defines this environment as the digital mirror. It's an ecosystem centered specifically around Instagram and its, symbiotic relationship with the psychology of comparison. To really wrap your head around this, think about a regular mirror in your house. You look into it, you see a true reflection of yourself situated in reality. But a digital mirror, it's fundamentally and structurally different. The reflection you're seeing isn't you. It's the highly selective, algorithmically curated realities of everyone else. It's built entirely out of highlight reels, completely hiding the messy, nuanced realities of actual human life. When someone logs in, they aren't seeing a cross-section of humanity. They're seeing a concentrated distillation of peak experiences and curated success. And it's within this specific, mathematically engineered environment that the underlying psychology of human comparison is intensely activated.
Moving right along to Section 2, the comparison loop, which is the mechanism of action.
Now, the engine driving this whole ecosystem is what's called the comparison loop. In business, you're all totally familiar with feedback loops, right? You use them in agile workflows, product development, performance reviews, you name it. But the comparison loop is a closed neurological feedback loop where the interface itself drives the cycle. Don't look at this as just a momentary lapse in user judgment or, a fleeting feeling of jealousy. It's a predictable, recurring mechanism driven directly by the app's architecture. This loop is what keeps users tethered to the digital mirror, constantly and inevitably evaluating their own, normal, unfiltered lives against the hyper-curated content of others. It's designed to be totally frictionless, and more importantly, it's a closed-loop system that weaponizes our social instincts to keep perpetuating itself.
The way this plays out is incredibly linear and honestly highly efficient. Step 1. Engage with the digital mirror. You know the drill. A user casually opens Instagram during a commute, maybe a lunch break, and starts scrolling. Seems totally harmless. Step 2. Trigger the psychology of comparison. Almost instantly, they're hit with imagery and lifestyles that prompt this involuntary cognitive response to measure their own status, looks, or success against what the algorithm feeds them. And then Step 3. Enter the comparison loop. Once that psychological trigger is pulled, they're kind of trapped. The frictionless design, like the infinite scroll with literally no stopping cues, makes escaping super difficult. The initial comparison creates a psychological deficit, which ironically makes them crave more information. So they scroll deeper, get triggered more, and get completely entrenched in the loop. They're actively seeking resolution, but the interface just feeds them more comparison.
This brings us to Section 3, rewiring the brain, looking at the neurological impact and the end state.
The source material hits us with a really uncompromising conclusion here. Instagram rewires your brain to feel worthless. And we need to look closely at the neuroscience behind that word, rewires, because we're not just talking about feeling temporarily sad or distracted. The data here is absolutely striking. When a user enters the comparison loop, they get these rapid spikes in dopamine triggered by novel stimuli. But that's immediately followed by a massive dopamine crash because the comparison inevitably results in a perceived social deficit. At that exact moment, the amygdala, the brain's threat processing center, goes into hyperdrive. The brain literally processes this social inferiority as a physiological threat, spiking cortisol levels. Over time, bouncing continuously between cheap dopamine hits and stress responses depletes dopamine receptors. The brain is structurally adapting to a lower baseline. It's being repeatedly trained to internalize a narrative of inadequacy. It's a profound chemical rewiring, and the specific measurable output is a chronic, pervasive sense of worthlessness. Just consider the shift from a normal baseline to this altered state. On one side, you've got a healthy, functional equilibrium, someone operating with standard self-worth, motivation, cognitive capacity. That is the baseline you absolutely expect from your teams and your market. But on the flip side, we have a brain actively rewired by the comparison loop and the digital mirror. The resulting state is characterized by that chemically induced feeling of being worthless. And for an executive, this shift is critical. A brain operating in this degraded psychological state suffers from depleted cognitive bandwidth. It is incredibly susceptible to decision fatigue. It operates with a much lower threshold for burnout because the individual's foundational resilience has been systematically eroded by chronic cortisol exposure and dopamine depletion. Your workforce and your consumers are interacting with reality through this compromised neurological lens.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, the executive takeaway and bottom line implications.
The comparison loop, how Instagram rewires your brain to feel worthless. This foundational finding really matters to your bottom line, because the people experiencing this continuous psychological rewiring, they aren't just abstract data points in some clinical study somewhere. They are your software engineers, they're your sales directors, your HR managers, they're the exact demographics buying your products and services. When a ubiquitous platform operates as a machine that systematically degrades a person's neurological baseline of self-worth, the impact ripples outward violently. In the workplace, you're looking at decreased employee retention, fragile workplace culture, and a severe drop in creative problem-solving capabilities, simply because anxiety is draining those cognitive resources. And on the consumer side, it drives purchasing anxiety. People aren't making buying decisions based on genuine brand loyalty or utility. They're buying in a desperate attempt to fill a neurologically induced void of validation. It is a direct hit to both human capital performance and market stability.
So, if this digital mirror rewires the brain to feel worthless, if it is actively hyperactivating the amygdala and crashing dopamine levels across millions of users every single day, how is the comparison loop impacting your workforce and consumers right now? It's a critical question that demands your immediate strategic attention. As you head back to your boardrooms to evaluate internal policies, health benefits, or even external marketing strategies, I strongly encourage you to look at social platforms as structural behavioral modifiers, not just communication tools. You have to acknowledge the invisible neurological tax your people are paying every time they pick up their phones. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this arms you with a vital framework for leading effectively in today's digital reality.